There are a lot of settings in Zoom, and some of them are really important to use some of the great features. So this video is going to go through all of the settings, provide some information on the choices you have, and also recommend some settings in place for security. Once logged into Zoom, click on Settings. Here you'll see a number of categories to our settings, and we're going to work our way through all of them. First, if a setting is toggled to blue, that means that that setting is turned on. If a setting is this faded blue, that means it's been locked on and you cannot change it. And if a setting is gray, that means it is currently turned off, but you do have the option to turn it on. Now, something you might want to do is play this video on your iPad or in another window so you can start and stop it as we go through, and you can work on your settings as you're watching the video. Starting here in the security category, the waiting room feature is definitely one that you want on. This prevents anyone from entering our Zoom meetings unless we allow them. This is a safety feature that we will lock on once the school year begins, so we can make sure that only our students are getting into our meetings. If it currently is not on, please turn it on. Here's a few settings that are currently locked on, having to do with passwords and passcodes. But I wanted to point out this one: require a passcode for personal meeting ID. So this is that password that your students would type in when they join a meeting. But if I click here, I can actually change that password. So I could change it to something that's much simpler for my littles to type in, or I can make it something that's a little more meaningful. So if I am at Greenbrier, I might want to change it to Greyhounds. I could make it my name, including a capital letter. I could include our room number. But just to know you have those options. Once you type in your passcode, you can click Save. I'm going to click Cancel because I've already scheduled some meetings using this passcode. Know that if you type a capital letter, your students are going to have to type a capital letter too. This one is an option that you may want to consider. We just talked about students typing in passwords, but if I toggle this setting on, embed passcode in invite link, that would mean the link that I share with families or post for students would already have the password embedded. So it would prevent the need for anyone to type in a password. As you can understand, this may have some security implications. We want to be very careful about where we're posting our links, especially if you turn on this setting. But it also can be really handy that if I'm posting a link, let's say in Google Classroom, and it's embedded in the header of my Google Classroom, and obviously only my students can log into that Google Classroom, clicking on that one link on their iPad and having the Zoom app just open up to the meeting might be something that you want to consider. These two down here, only authenticated users can join meetings. These authenticated users, while it sounds like a really good idea, if we toggle these on, we are going to keep our students out of our meetings because authenticated users are only people who have Zoom accounts in our Zoom domain. And since our students don't have Zoom accounts, we want to keep these toggled off. The next category is scheduling a meeting. These two talk about videos. Do you want that video instantly on or instantly off during the meetings? You can choose how you feel about those. The audio type, I would keep to computer and telephone audio. Our students will be joining via computer audio. So they may have to tap that when they join the meeting. But this telephone option allows you to parents to join a meeting. For example, if you need to talk with a parent, they could join just the audio portion on their telephone. They don't need to be in front of a computer. It could also allow, if maybe a student can't get to the Zoom meeting through their iPad, but they could still listen on a telephone. Join before host, I keep this toggled off, although the waiting room feature really makes this redundant. I still keep it off just in case. Your personal meeting ID, you definitely want to keep that toggled on since that's how we're recommending you schedule your meetings. So it's that one link all the time. I like to keep this one on as well. If perchance I do need to schedule a meeting in upcoming meetings, I can use that same personal meeting room link. This one I think is super important. That way your students aren't coming in all noisily, even when you're letting them in from the waiting room, that everybody's muted when they join the meeting. I also like these upcoming meeting reminders. It's a little notification on my computer about 15 minutes before a Zoom meeting to let me know that it is scheduled. So that is really a personal choice, but I find it very handy. Moving down to in-meeting basic. Lots of choices for you here. You can allow your participants to have the chat feature or not. Right now it's turned off. Private chat, I suggest keeping that off so we don't have students private messaging. In the chat, if I do toggle that on, I like to keep prevent participants from saving chat so we don't have that option for them. Again, your choice. Auto saving chats, you may want to, if you do turn on that chat feature, you might want to auto save in case you need to refer back to that. This is one of my favorite options. It may not be yours. I like to turn on the sound notification when someone joins or leaves. So we have the waiting room enabled, and once you have started the meeting, you will hear a chime every time somebody joins your meeting. I find that handy so I don't leave anybody sitting in the waiting room, especially maybe the meeting has started a few minutes into the meeting, someone joins. If I don't notice that they've joined under the participation setting, then they could be left in the waiting room. So I like to hear that audible sound. It's just a little chime. If you watch the breakout room video, or the waiting room video, you would see how that works. I like to turn it on just for co-hosts and myself as the host. If you turn on for everybody, that means the students are going to hear that chime every time somebody joins, and that could be a little distracting. Again, others might feel that's totally annoying, but I find it super handy. File transfer, your choice. Do you want, you'll be sharing files with students through the chat feature, kind of up to you. You can certainly leave it turned off and turn it back on at another time. I keep the feedback and the surveys turned off. Students don't need to be seeing that. Co-host, this is a really handy feature to turn on if you have an assistant or another adult who's going to be joining you in your meetings. There is a whole video on co-hosts. This is definitely something you'll want to consider if you're going to be using breakout rooms. And we talk a little bit more about how co-hosts can be helpful during breakout rooms. So I would just enable that. Even if you don't use it, you'll know it'll be ready for you should you choose to use it at a later date. I like to keep the control bar showing. I like my Zoom windows to show when I screen share. What this means is if I share my screen, I can still see all my participants and kind of scroll through there to see how things are going and if they're paying attention, if their video's turned on or their reactions. Screen sharing, I would think you'd want to keep that turned on. But here I would suggest making sure that it is the host only can share their screen. You can give permission to other participants, but this way you have control. Nobody's sharing a screen unless you allow them to. Here, the annotation. This allows, as it says, the host and participants to use annotation tools over a shared screen. You may want to toggle that on. Again, these are some of the things that you may want to play around with and see which tools really serve you best. given the lessons and things you'll be doing. Your whiteboard, different than annotation. Annotation is drawing and writing over a shared screen, but a whiteboard is just as it says, it's a white screen where you can add a little bits of text and some stamps and you can draw. So that's a little bit different. There's a separate video on whiteboard. This nonverbal feedback and meeting reactions, these two kind of go together. The meeting reactions are probably ones that you're familiar with. That's the thumbs up or the clapping icons. So if you turn that on, students would have the ability to use those maybe if they agree with something, or again, the clapping icon if they want to show their approval. The nonverbal feedback provides a little bit more nonverbal feedback options. So it would be things like yes and no, and I believe there's a check mark in there. So you could use them in collaboration, or you could choose one or the other, something you'll want to experiment with your students. I like to keep this one toggled off, allow removed participants to rejoin. So that means if you remove a student or any participant in your meeting, that they cannot come back during that meeting. Should you schedule a new meeting, they could join the next day or later that day once you quit out of the meeting and start it again. That's definitely one of our safety features. Allowing participants to rename themselves, again, a choice. Hide participant profile pictures in a meeting. Here's what this means. When someone turns off their camera, right now you just see their name. If I toggle this on, this would allow any profile picture they've uploaded in there. For our youngest students, I don't think this is going to matter. As students get older, they may figure out how to put in a profile picture. And this is kind of just class management. If you are finding it's distracting, you might want to leave it off. But it might be nice if people have their cameras off to be able to still see some sort of image, especially if it's their photo. In meeting advance, this is really a choice. Report participants to Zoom. I keep this on the off chance that somebody gets into one of my meetings that is an uninvited guest. Obviously, we have a lot of safety features in place, so this may not be necessary, but that's why I keep it on. This breakout room feature, I would just go ahead and turn it on right now. That way it'll be there should you decide to use it. It won't matter, but if you don't use it, but it will show on your toolbar and you can have it at your disposal when needed. A lot of these here that we're just going to kind of scroll through because they really should just stay off. Virtual background, your choice. It's always a lot of fun to see people at the beach in their meeting, or I was in a meeting yesterday, somebody was in the Brady Bunch house, but you kind of get the idea here. If you turn it on for yourself, you're also turning it on for your students. Again, a lot of these here, we're just keeping them off. This one, join from browser link, this would allow students to click on your URL and join your Zoom meeting from a browser rather than from the Zoom app. I don't find that this works very well on an iPad, so I keep this toggled off. You may want to try it. I think it may cause some issues, especially if they're making this choice rather than using the Zoom app. Email notification. I like to keep these two toggled on. What happens here is if somebody joins the meeting before I start the meeting, maybe they join 10 minutes early and I tend to get in my Zoom meetings about 5 minutes early, this would just send me an email that somebody's in the Zoom meeting waiting for me. Obviously, we are holding all of our attendees in the waiting room. but sometimes it also just prompts me as another reminder that my meeting is coming up. The rest of these two here, I think, are just kind of keep them toggled as they are. I do want to point out this, though, especially if you're sending invitations to parents, that you can choose a Zoom invitation to be created in a different language if needed. And you can see a little preview there. Now, this one sounds like a great idea, this schedule privilege, assign scheduling privileges to. I have not been able to get it to work. It may be something in our settings, but I have not been able to, with our account as it currently is, been able to give that privilege to someone else. So for right now, the scheduling privileges does not seem to work. And that's the end of all the of all the Zoom settings. So if you have any questions, again, please reach out to Ronit or to Judy Epke, and we would be happy to kind of help you through some of these Zoom settings or answer some additional questions.